This is Hops and Spirits Bar Conversations. Come for the craft beer, bourbon, whiskey, and great drinks. Stay for the conversations. Here's your host, Jonathan Green.
Welcome into another edition of the Bar Conversations, and it's a landmark edition at that. We have hit the big 100. That's right, episode 100. You're listening to it right now, and it's a fun one. We talked to John Inghram. His debut album is out now as part of our conversations, and he has a cool story about just his journey and everything and how his career has gone. And our tasting notes is, again, Spirits 101 with Jake Sulek as we talk brandy. That's right, cognac and all sorts of others. It's a lot to take in and a lot to learn. Enjoy these Spirits 101. We'll be doing these all months long with Jake. Then we'll flip over to a few other different things throughout the summer as well. But let's not waste any more time and get into episode 100. Enjoy.
It's almost time. Where did I put those? Here they are. It's time for tasting notes.
Back with us again here in June for Spirits 101 is none other than the beverage director partner with the Professors LLC and a guy that I just love talking to, Jake Sulek. Welcome back.
Thanks for having me, Jonathan. I appreciate it.
Well, like I said, I appreciate you. We talked about gin in our Spirits 101 last week, along with vodka and some other grain-neutral spirits that kind of come out of that world, so to speak. And now we're going to one I think is pretty fun because, you know, we live in Kentucky. We've got a couple of these producers here, and they're obviously around the world as well. And it's brandy. So for those that don't know brandy, what is it? And it's not the singer.
Yeah. Brandy is the sort of overarching umbrella academy. In the same way that all Kentucky bourbon is a kind of whiskey, brandy is the overarching category. So everything that we're going to be talking about today is going to fall into the general brandy category. Brandy differs from other spirit categories because it's always made from fruit. That's its defining characteristic. So in the same way, in the last time we talked about gin and vodka often being made from grain and how it works, brandy is going to be done the same way. You're going to take a lot of fruit, and that can be anything. Let's say, for example, grapes or apples. They're going to be fermented. After fermentation happens, then they're going to be distilled. And that tends to be where it's separated, because whereas vodka and gin, the way that we know it, is always produced on column stills, a lot of brandies go back many hundreds of years, and so they're made on an older style of still, which is called a copper still. I think probably the most famous brandy category in the world is going to be cognac. Cognac is named after the region in France where it's made, and legally you can only make cognac in Cognac, France. Like certain other categories like tequila and American whiskey, the standards for cognac are really high. So you can only use a specific kind of still. You always have to distill it twice. You always have to use direct heat. And then there's a very specific rating system for how cognac is blended. Those are the weird, seemingly arbitrary letters you'll see on a cognac bottle, where you've got VS, VSOP, Napoleon, and then XO. Those categories refer to how old a cognac is. So for example, VS is going to be a minimum of 2 years. That's going to be the youngest spirit in the bottle. VSOP is going to be 4, Napoleon is going to be 6, and then XO, sometimes called Ordage, is always going to be 10 years or older. But there are a lot of other interesting brandy areas in France as well. You've got Armagnac to the south, which is going to be made with a different set of grapes, slightly different rules, but a similar product. To the north in Normandy, you're going to have Calvados. Calvados, instead of being made from grapes, is going to be made from pears and apples. And there's a lot of parallels between Calvados and some companies in the United States. Because when farmer settlers came from the old world to the new world, one of the first things we started doing was taking peaches and apples in the new world, fermenting them and distilling them and making brandy. So in fact, one of the first distillery license in the United States was granted to Laird's Company in New Jersey, and they've been making apple brandy for over 300 years now. So you can kind of see how that transferred over time to different areas. But again, really all about the fruit. Brandies are often aged, but they don't have to be. Pisco is a wonderful brandy in South America. It's made in both Peru and Chile. Pisco is always unaged. It's made from very different grapes. Usually only one distillation, so the flavor profile is a little bit different, and it's not imported heavily into the United States yet. But again, all about the fruit base. The Old World also has a tradition of doing other fruits and vegetables, which can be really fun. They tend to be called eau de vies, which just means water of life. They're always unaged, but you can get really fun and find some really weird stuff, like a bell pepper eau de vie, a carrot eau de vie. These tend to be really small runs that just like a local farmer will do for you. But again, it always comes down to the fruit or vegetable that's being fermented.
I love that because as we get through this, I feel like we'll see how similar so many of these are in terms of just the processes and so forth. But like with brandy, for someone that maybe has never had one, what can they expect? I mean, obviously the fruit and stuff will determine a lot, but what are your typical kind of, I guess, markers for a brandy?
If you're talking about, let's say, something really traditional like a cognac or an armagnac, they're generally always going to have a little bit of age on them, which is going to help round them out. But being a copper pot still product, they tend to have more esters. Esters are created during fermentation. They're something that distillers often look for. They tend to be very fruity. So when you're sipping a cognac, especially if you do it right next to an American whiskey, you can tell right away that it's going to be fruit-based. You're going to get a lot of fruit aromas, a lot of fruit flavors. They tend to hold up really well against the oak. A lot of brandies aren't necessarily always done in new oak. If it's not an American product, they're often done in used oak, so the oak's a little bit more subdued. So you get a lot of classic dried fruit flavors, which pair really well with the toffee and caramel flavors from the barrel. So the lessened amount of oak on the palate tends to be another indicator that, okay, we're probably dealing with a fine brandy rather than a really nice American whiskey.
And, for those that are looking for something, when someone says, I always laugh because now that I think of it, I'm like, boy, this would have been so smart of me and so easy to think of. Applejack, that's apple brandy, correct?
Yeah.
So, I mean, like little names like that people may go afterwards, oh, that makes total sense. But to the, I guess, person that's, it's unknown, what are some things like that are brandy related that people may not think of or realize what they are?
Well, you're lucky in the United States because the way that we label everything here, it's always by the actual product and varietal. Unlike a lot of countries in Europe, France in particular, where you're labeling by region, you might not know what a cognac is, but here in the United States, you're certainly going to know what a brandy is. And we've got a lot of connections in this area, even in Kentucky. Heaven Hill owns Christian Brothers, which is out in California, and they make a wonderful bottled in bond brandy called Sacred Bond that you can actually buy here. So that's a great start into the brandy category. As I mentioned before, Laird's out of New Jersey does amazing apple brandy products, and they're always labeled as such. It'll always have apple brandy, and because we're dealing with the American laws on these kind of products, they'll say straight apple brandy. They do a bottled in bond apple brandy as well as some single barrel apple brandies that have come out over the last 2 years, which is really fun. Of course, Copper and Kings in Kentucky make apple brandy in addition to their regular grape brandy as well. But I would start with something from the United States just because the labeling is going to be a little bit clearer, I think, for most people.
And you mentioned, obviously there's apple brandy, grape brandy. Any other types that would most likely be seen on the brandy side on the shelves?
Pear brandy is probably, I'd say, third most common. Often unaged. Occasionally you'll see a producer make it. There are some American producers. There's a producer in Oregon that makes some really nice pear brandy. You see apricot brandy occasionally as well. Most of that comes over from Germany, Austria, and France. But apricot brandy is fairly common to find on shelves as well. Now you want to be careful with the brandy category. Brandy here, we're talking about a spirit. Often, especially when you're at a liquor store, you'll find what 100 years ago we called fruit brandies. Sounds like a misnomer because it is. Fruit brandy is short for fruit brandy liqueur. So that Peachtree Schnapps for $9.99 at your local liquor store, it may say peach brandy on it, but what that really means is that it's just a neutral alcohol spirit that's been flavored with peach, It's not actually distilled from peaches. So you have to be careful because brandy can sometimes just mean brandy liqueur. It's not the same thing as a product actually being made from fermented and distilled fruit.
They're two vastly different things.
Very different things.
And I assume too you would see it on the proof point, because I'm guessing brandy's, if it's a bottle and bond, obviously it's 100
Exactly.
proof, 4 years. I'm guessing brandy's going to be a lot stronger than, say, a brandy.
Yeah, if it's under 80 proof, it's actually a liqueur product. It's not a true brandy.
I love it, and it's so interesting too to learn about brandy, because I feel like it's, in a weird way, kind of what some whiskey drinkers and others might really enjoy on occasion.
Absolutely.
And Jake, I appreciate this as always. We talk gin, brandy, and now we're going to have a little fun and go to rum next week. I thank you as always.
Of course, thanks. I'm looking forward to it.
Remember to check out Hops and Spirits on social media at Hop Spirits, all one word, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Twitter. You can also find Hops and Spirits on YouTube and at hopspirits.com.
Joining us here on the Bar Conversations, he just released his debut solo album. It's out now. He's from Charleston, West Virginia. Please welcome in John Inghram. John, welcome.
Hey, good to be here. Thanks for having me, Jonathan.
Well, I appreciate you being here. You know, I asked you what beforehand. I always like to ask if you got a drink, since it is Bar Conversations. You got anything good tonight?
I am being pretty tame tonight. I've got the seltzer. It's not even flavored. It's completely plain. So I feel like I brought the most boring possible beverage I could find.
That's okay. I mean,
Sorry.
I just that, you know, it's okay. I've got a little Colorado whiskey, little Breckenridge. I apparently didn't realize it was in my behind a bottle, and I was like, "Ooh, that's like full. That'll be a fun one to have tonight." Now,
yeah,
I know
a little diamond in the rough.
Exactly. Now I know you're behaving yourself this evening, but if you're not behaving yourself, what are some of your favorite go-to drinks?
Well, I mean, I guess if I'm in a session, you know, I'm like a drinking session, I'll probably be drinking, you know, swag beer, low ABV if it's game day, or if I'm you know, I'm gonna have several, I'll probably do a Miller Lite or something like that. But I do like good beer. I like IPAs and sours and Kolsch's and things like that. But as far as liquor goes, I like whiskey a lot. You know what I mean? And I love tequila. So I really like a lot of different things. I love, like, you know, like gin and a what's the drink I just discovered? And I think it's a Campari as well. A Negroni.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So I've just, you know, I like it all, man.
Hey, nothing wrong with that.
I like
Nothing
wine
wrong
a
with
lot
that.
as well.
So you're a man of many tastes.
Yeah, I like to. Yeah, absolutely. You can say that.
Now you know we talk about you know you got a debut solo album out, but you also have kind of what I would call a day job or something kind of on those lines that keeps you in touch with a lot of things, and that's the Mountain Stage production that people might know about. But you actually got to go from behind to out front, and not just out front to fill in, but out front to be the act. What was that like?
Well, I mean, it was like a dream come true. I mean, first of all, I'm an assistant producer with the show, so you know I'm in the office Monday through Friday working on, you know, behind the scenes stuff, and then I've subbed on the show, you know, and played bass in the house band quite a lot over the years. But yeah, so this was the first time I ever, you know, was front and center downstage, you know, as a featured artist on the show, which is like, it's just a dream come true, because for years I've, you know, of course, dreamt about that, and wondered if that opportunity might ever present itself. So it was a pretty special moment when it finally did.
I mean, were there any like jitters or anything like beforehand that almost you were like, whoa, like, you know, just where it all set in?
Well, what was scary was, you know, I do typically get a little nervous, and I find that it's a good sign, because it means I'm focused. You know what I mean? I'm kind of like in there. But I was getting a little worried because I wasn't getting very nervous leading up to the show. So David Bromberg was actually scheduled to be on the show, and then had a COVID case in his band, so they canceled last minute. So they had to pivot. It's a 5-act show. You know what I mean? If you're not familiar with Mountain Stage, there's 5 acts and a little over a 2-hour show, and then it gets reduced down and edited for radio broadcast. But so David Bromberg had to drop out, so they asked me if I could do it, which not the best circumstances, but I'm glad everybody in his camp is okay. But it worked out well. We actually sold more tickets than we had to refund, which is always a good sign. So, but yeah, I mean, the nerves thing, I was getting a little worried because I wasn't nervous the couple days leading up to the show, and then right before we went on, it hit me, and I was like, oh boy, there it is. So, but it all went well. The set went really well, and it's just kind of surreal.
I mean, for someone like you that's kind of done music, played with a lot of different folks, when did you get into music, like to play and things like that, and not just kind of enjoy listening to it?
Well, so I guess, I was always around music, family, a lot of family musicians and family players and stuff like that, and church and just at home, playing like kind of country and bluegrass standards and stuff like that. A lot of Southern gospel. But I guess when I started to, probably about eighth or ninth grade, I started to get into the bass versus, like, I found the bass kind of found me, right? So the story is, I had two, which is a common story. I had two best friends, and I was like, hey guys, I'm going to get an electric guitar, we can, jam and stuff. One of my best friends played the drums. The other best friend played guitar. So both of them kind of in unison were like, man, you should get a bass, and then we'll start a band, So I was like, okay, well, that sounds great. And that was about 8th grade. And then I really started to catch the bug, you know what I mean? And just kind of like everything else was like, okay, no more baseball, no more, video games and all that stuff. It was just kind of like music all the time. And that was probably when I was like 15.
I mean, did you ever think that you would then end up kind of turning it into a career?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, I kind of, was a little bit of a, I wasn't a great student. I didn't care for school much, and a lot of the teachers, I don't think I hit it very well. And so a lot of the teachers you'd be like, you need to take care of this stuff because you might not be, music might be a tough go. Because I was always very, very clear that I wanted to do music, probably more out of naivete than I don't know, stick-it-to-itiveness or whatever. But I kind of liked the attitude of being like, I'm going to prove you wrong, and that you can make a living, and I'm just gonna go for it blindly. So it's starting to pay off, you know what I mean?
Well, I was gonna say, I mean, you've played bass for the likes of some pretty solid folks. I mean, from Chuck Prophet to Vince Herman, so many others. But now you've gone a different route. You've gone solo. Why the switch now, I guess, so to speak?
Well, I mean, like I said, I really did fall in love with the bass, the function of the bass and the role of the bass, and different players and just the sound and the technology and so many different things about it. I just really, it appealed to me. So I love that part of what I do is to like support other people's music and make other people's music better and serve their songs and their kind of agenda or whatever, and just provide that support. I love that. But a big part of me, I've always written music. I've always geeked out on that stuff too. So, but I'd never really done. I've done some EPs and played with, of course, Fletcher's Grove, and I've written with that band and some other bands and stuff. But I was like, I want to do a record of my own. I've always kind of wanted to do it. Well, then, of course, I had time on my hands in 2020 and 2021 to kind of make it happen. So, silver linings.
Well, I mean, and you mentioned you are still out with some of those groups playing with Fletcher's Grove recently, things like that. I mean, how does your solo music kind of differ from the bands that you play with?
Well, I'm writing all the stuff by myself as so far, so obviously with those other bands, part of what makes it really cool is that everybody's kicking the ball around. You might have somebody bring in a song or bring in the skeleton of a song, and then kind of the arrangement starts to come together when you're kind of co-writing, in a sense. But with that, the kind of downside of that is that things can get too democratic, and so productivity can kind of be a little slower. You know what I mean? Because everybody's like, well, what if we tried this, or what if we did that, or check this out, and it's like very cool, and it's a very fun, like tight way to compose, but when it's just you, I feel like you're just directly to the source. You know what I mean? And there's obviously positives and negatives to that as well. But yeah, with this particular situation, I did one cover. I did a Hartford cover on the CD, but everything else is stuff that I wrote pretty much by myself. So,
I mean, what did you grow up on this kind of music, or were you kind of just a rock kid all the way through, or did you mention country too and things like that? I mean, or just a whole bunch of songs that you would just love?
Well, from a family perspective, it was a lot of country and Southern gospel and kind of like classical, some folk rock stuff too, but and that was on my mom's side of the family. My dad's side of the family, of course, he kind of got me into like Steely Dan and the Stones, and that was more of because his era, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Grew up through the 60s and 70s and the 80s and stuff, so it's like there's that element too. But I was a big jazz head, and I mean I still play a lot of jazz and studied it in school, but kind of had an alternate personality going on, as you're doing this like very kind of like academic and heady, disciplined thing. Not that the other doesn't require discipline, but you know what I'm saying. And then there's this other part of me that's like, mm-hmm. The big deadhead, Fish fan, into like the kind of, obviously all the classics, the Beatles and Zeppelin, the Stones and all that stuff. So, yeah, I mean, I guess the short answer is yes, I've always been into this kind of stuff since I fell in love with music, but it's kind of like an interesting thing has happened it's like I kind of get that kid-like feeling again when I'm playing this stuff, like you do kind of when you're in a garage band in high school. So that never has gone away, really.
Well, I mean, like, as you write or your pull, I mean, does this, because I mean, we'll talk a little bit about the album here in a little bit and just kind of how it came together. But I mean, like when you're writing stuff, are you pulling from experiences, ideas, and how does that go for you? And especially when you're kind of crafting the sound, because you kind of have a little bit of a unique spin on some things on this album.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't really help if you're being true to yourself and just writing without. I don't know. You're going to come out. Your experiences are going to come out whether you like it or not. I think. Probably even if you're being disingenuous, I mean, your true self is going to be there somewhere. It's just by nature of the fact that you're creating something. But in this sense, I just try to be really open. I tried to be really kind of open with my writing process. So yeah, there's some themes on the record about kind of passage of time was a kind of a through line on the record, and some stuff that reconciling the past, kind of living in the present, not living in the future either, and then of course my family and travel and touring and stuff. So some of those themes do kind of come up. Just it's not like I tried to put them out there. It's just kind of what came out.
It's just second nature. It's ingrained in you with everything you've been through. what you've been in the industry for a while, and you kind of work in it in a different way too. What's your journey been like on all of this?
I mean, I just I've had a lot of great teachers and mentors, and I've been really, really fortunate to play with people that were better than me and who let me play along, and I guess saw something in me, and good people. That's another thing. Of course, everybody in this business has had some bad experiences. I mean, it's like any job, but especially in the music industry, things can get squirrely fast. And I've been really, really fortunate to play with folks and work with folks that are good people and honest and want, good things for folks. So, yeah, I mean, it's been an interesting career so far. I'm 37 now, and I really hit the ground running. I did a few years of college and school and stuff like that, and basically just played the whole time. I didn't finish school because I was like, I'm playing. I'm on the bandstand, and that's where the real education comes from, in my opinion. So, yeah, I've just been really fortunate to play with great musicians, and
Well, is it weird for you too at times to kind of step out and be on this side where you're talking to me on a podcast about your music?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, I like it. I mean, it is like kind of weird, but it's a muscle that I need to work, I guess, if I'm going to do this kind of, thing.
But I mean that's life. That's how things go. And when you were working on your debut album, what was that like for you, especially with that kind of the long break, obviously, of not being able to play a whole lot, but also I think you did it in two separate sessions, right? Basically,
Right.
Recording it and all that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've got a lot of experience in the studio. So, because as a bass player, as a sideman, I've done a lot of sessions and a lot of recording, and I do a lot of recording at my house and stuff like that. So I love that process, and so I take it really seriously, and I've been doing it for a long time. So writing the songs is like one personality, and then you kind of have to learn the songs as another, perform them, learn how to perform them, and that takes another kind of part of your thing. So when going into the studio is comfortable. So, I mean, I'm grateful that I have that kind of thing going on. But then with the songwriting stuff, it's the confidence. I find the confidence in the songs. Like, is this any good? You know what I mean? And this has really kind of like elucidated some of that. That little critic, that little voice in your mind where it's like, is this total, bullshit, or is this any good? And are my buddies saying that it's good just because they're my buddies, or, and so that was been something I've been, kind of dealing with, but it's like, not in an unhealthy way, but just, that voice is going to be there. And then I see like interviews with Win Butler from Arcade Fire or some other people that I really love, and they're dealing with it too. And so it's like, okay, well, this is normal then. So just fight through it and just put the stuff out there and make it for yourself and hope for the best.
I mean, did you get any constructive criticism while working on this from your buddies?
Yeah, they're pretty subjective, and I can take or objective rather, and I can take criticism well. So I don't take it personally when things are, if somebody's like, I don't know, I don't think you need to do that here. If I got some like cool thing that I'm like, oh, this is going to be really neat, and they're like, that's bass player shit. Don't do that. Just and I'm like, okay, yeah, you're probably right. That's the voice of reason. So. But yeah, they're all, I mean, and again, I work with sweethearts. I work with good people. I've been lucky that way. And because at this point in the game, I don't have to work with people who are jerks. I mean, nobody really has to, but I've just been fortunate. Just like, the people that I'm around are really good and nice and pure of heart. So, yeah, nobody's been like, mean about it.
Which is good, because otherwise
Yeah.
you might have different conversations with them on that. I think I read where you said there was some piece that you felt was missing as a creative. You needed this to serve your own original music with a creation of something like this. What kind of spurred that kind of feeling on?
Well, so what's kind of interesting is I did start working on this in like the winter of 2019. Like I already knew I wanted to do the record. Obviously, didn't know that the next 2 years were going to be like the way they were, but or 3 years or whatever. But
Surprise!
yeah, exactly right. So, but what's interesting, is let's see, what was I getting at there? I kind of lost my train of thought with the. Yeah, I'm sorry.
You were recording, looking in 2019, recording, and where did that kind of creative feeling that you
Oh,
needed
right.
to kind of get your own music out?
Yeah, so I mean, it was just that feeling of like having that other personality that wasn't maybe getting as much attention over the years, like that bass player, sideman, um, supportive role, which I love, but it took so much of the piece of the pie, right? And only a little bit of attention was going to this, like, well, I have something to say too, and I like to write lyrics as well. And so there's these other things. And as a composer, I have, things that I want to do, musically. So I just felt like, why not, do this now? There's no sense in not doing it. And I think part of what stopped me for a long time was like, well, it's convenient to be a sideman because people often contact you, and you're not in charge of the tour managing as much, and doing like the keeping the books together. You just get your paycheck, and you don't have to worry about the merch, and you just show up and play, and it's really nice. But yeah, I just kind of got to the point where I was like, I'm gonna do this and kind of exercise these demons a little bit, and then lo and behold, the world shut down, and I had all this time on my hands, so I was able to write the rest of the record, the second half of the record, and then record a little later. But yeah, man, really cool experience.
I mean, and obviously we're here to talk about your record too that is out now. What can folks expect on your debut album, self-titled debut album?
Well, it definitely has a folk rock bent to it, some psychedelic kind of 60s rock isms. But yeah, it kind of goes in a few different directions. There's a couple harder rock tunes, one that's almost in a Nick Lowe new wave kind of Elvis Costello vein, which is Here to Stay. And Same Old Game has a kind of a Grateful Dead vibe. Palisades, I think. I hate put too many close labels on them, but when I'm not going to run from those influences. I just had to be honest about it because it is what it is. Palisades definitely has like a Jimi Hendrix ballad vibe. So yeah, I mean, yeah.
I was gonna say I love the Palisades. That's a great tune. I mean, was there like a song on there that you just love to play no matter how you're feeling? Or are they all your kids and they're all your favorites?
Well, that's a nice thought and everything, but there's things I like about my actual kids, and there's things I don't like about my actual kids. I still love them, but yeah, I'd
understand
say
that.
No, but I'd say Little Mountain Mama live has been pretty fun because we've kind of stretched out the arrangement from what you hear on the record, so it kind of gets a little longer and jams pretty hard at the end. So live, that's pretty killing.
And too, I also love the album cover art. How did that come about?
Yeah, Jimbo Valentine did that. He's an artist out of Huntington, West Virginia. He's worked with a bunch of amazing artists like Town Mountain and Tyler Childers, Arlo McKinley, and done a lot of graphic design work here in the region, but nationally as well. Excuse me. And I knew, whatever I gave to Jimbo, he was gonna put a lot of care into. He's just got a lot of integrity that way. It's not just a job, he's gonna put some real energy and love into it. So I gave him a few ideas of what I had in mind, but like some elements, but he really ran with it. And I couldn't be happier. I think it's great.
I love the art, and it I feel like it also works so well with what you put together on your side of the art, and what's kind of inside the album cover. And when you're getting to share your music, what's that like for you to actually get to play these songs? And then obviously you're on tour, kind of some solo stuff and some band things too.
It's cool, man. I love to sing, and I love to kind of, tell jokes from the mic and, be front and center and stuff. So it's a really cool experience to get to do that and not worry about getting fired. Some some other band leader may not be too into that, but since it's my gig, I can do and say what I want for the most part. So that's pretty cool. And, playing. I know it's like a little weird because I don't have anybody else to fall back on, to be like, all right, why don't you do one now? Or somebody else in the band sing one. Of course, we might get to that point because everybody else in the band could easily do that, which is awesome. But yeah, I'm kind of like, all right, well, I got to carry the show and be up here and, the whole time, it's like full tilt boogie. I don't ever get to step back in the shadows and just be the bass player.
Well, and you are on tour, like I said, you're doing some solo stuff, some things like that. Is that kind of the hope for the rest of the year as well?
Yeah. So Fletcher's Grove, we have we've had several gigs this month. We have a few festivals next month, and just over the summer we've got some nice festivals coming up. And played with piano player Bob Thompson, who's from the Mountain Stage Band and a phenomenal jazz piano player. And so we're doing some stuff this summer. I'm doing a big David Bowie tribute with Kanika Moore from Doom Flamingo and a bunch of other great guests. So I'm producing that. So we're getting geared up for that. But the hope is probably towards like the fall and winter, try to do a little bit more of the solo stuff and try to work some clubs and things. And it's all balancing it with my Mountain Stage schedule and all that stuff. So yeah, the hope is to go out and play this stuff as much as I can. Definitely.
Fingers crossed that everything stays safe. And as I wrap up, you can follow John on Instagram, Inghram_bass. He's also on Facebook. Find him, Fletcher's Grove too. I guess anything else you're hoping for here in 2022?
I'm hoping that there's no monkeypox outbreak that precludes me from going out and playing this material for real people and real actual venues. So we're getting back to it, and it's exciting, So, but Nam, just thank you so much for having me on. It's been a great chat with you, man.
John, I appreciate it. Thanks for sharing a little seltzer with me and letting me have a little harder drink.
Yeah, well, next time I'm gonna come a little bit more prepared.